Hey everyone, welcome to a brand new segment that we are going to call Social Encounters, where we get a couple friends on here and we talk about role playing and all that good stuff. Today I've got with me the brothers Tucker, Andrew and Chris, and on the line we have Scott Royer. How you guys doing today?
Good.
Doing
Just
great.
getting off work.
Yeah, looking forward to talking about D&D, gaming, all sorts of fun things.
Yeah, kick the
man.
weekend off.
No doubt.
Well, I thought first we would talk about the topic of who goes first. And when I say that, I mean initiative, which is something that we've been debating the last couple days. But before we get into that, why don't you guys tell me a little bit about how you guys got into role-playing and where it's brought you today?
Sure. I'll go first.
Sure.
So let's see. I guess I can thank Scott for the role-playing part of my dive into gaming with first probably watching him play EverQuest for a while back in, I don't know, 1995.
99.
Yeah, good old 1999. And then a little game called World of Warcraft came out, to which I've devoted the last, 20 years of playing to, and various times kind of joining role-playing servers and trying to do some of that. And to his credit, for a long time, Scott kept asking us if we wanted to play D&D and if we wanted to try this thing out. And we all just kept being, super cool 20-somethings and being like, nah, we don't want to do that. Let's do other things. And then finally we said, yeah, let's give it a whirl. And here we are, almost a full year into our campaign, getting ready to play in about a week from now.
Yeah, a week from tomorrow? Or?
Yeah, almost a week from tomorrow on that next Sunday. So yeah, I started with video games, and then from there just kind of spiraled down into D&D and other types of games like that.
Nice. How about you?
My name's Andrew, or Spud, or Thranduil. Pretty much got into the whole fantasy gaming thing because of my brother here, because World of Warcraft, again. It was Feldo, your dwarf priest.
Oh yeah.
That I hopped on every now and then. Yeah. Then got my own account, which was actually Scott's account, so not my own. And then played a dwarf rogue up to level 45, where I decided I did not want to be a dwarf anymore, so I started over and played a gnome rogue and played that to max level.
Mm-hmm.
Which is like 2 years of work if you had never played vanilla WoW. It was stupid.
Yeah.
But after that, pretty much just stuck loving RPGs in general. Really got into D&D, honestly, because of Harmon Quest. I was always kind of interested in it. We tried to play it in high school, me and a bunch of our theater friends, but none of us were experienced. None of us really knew anything about it. So that lasted about one session, and then we never kept going with it. So getting back into it again was awesome. And now we're here on the 1 year anniversary of your campaign. Been playing other campaigns with yours, Scott. I think yours was actually my first one when you were DMing a long time ago.
Oh, the ones like a long time ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was like 2 sessions long or something.
Yeah, we got in a couple.
It.
Yeah, that was fun.
That was like three years ago. 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah.
But probably when I started playing it seriously.
Nice.
Well, seriously.
Right.
As serious as D&D can be.
Right. And Scott, would you say that your story was kind of similar?
So I started by playing EverQuest, as Chris alluded to, and I didn't know anything about RPGs or anything like that. Really enjoyed, playing a social game where you're just this class or race of different things and you can beat up on bad guys. Then I found out about Dungeons and Dragons, and it intrigued me because I didn't understand how decisions are made with a dice. It was a completely foreign concept to me that you just roll it and that's the outcome. And so I tried to get all my friends to play for years and years, and nobody ever wanted to play, which I can't say I fault them for, but I wish we had gotten to it a lot earlier. But I basically have just been playing EverQuest and World of Warcraft and basically any other MMO that's come out since then, until I was finally able to talk all my friends into playing D&D, and we started, and it's been a blast, an absolute blast. So
that's awesome.
Basically started with video games, and now we're here.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of funny the way that works. It's like those original RPGs kind of spun off into video games because guys that were playing our tabletop RPGs in the late 70s and 80s,
Mhm.
then became programmers, made video games based on them, and then now they're kind of like roping all of us back in.
It's
On the
kind
other
of
side of
like
it.
World of Warcraft was a gateway drug for all of us.
Yeah.
And now we're just
Weird.
like doing the uncut.
Yeah,
pure-
the pure cut, pure unremoved everything. Yeah. It's cool too to go back and look at vanilla WoW and see all the mechanics that relate directly to Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
so much of it, I kind of, now that we're playing D&D and we might play on like, free servers or whatever, private servers, whatever you want to call them, like you can go back and see those mechanics and they automatically relate back to the game. And like you can even like see like the dice rolling behind the screen if you're paying enough attention to like your hits and misses and all that stuff. And you're like, oh yeah, I see how this relates perfectly to a dice based tabletop game.
Yeah.
Like to piggyback onto that, like what you're talking about is like the progression of gaming has basically come from this idea of dice rolling and tabletop gaming. Like the 6 seconds that we have in Dungeons and Dragons 5e for being around is the same as an attack swing in EverQuest, which is the same cooldown in World of Warcraft.
Mhm.
It's all based off of this, like every round is a X period of time determined, and it all stemmed from Dungeons and Dragons, which is phenomenal since Dungeons and Dragons came out in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Gary
like
Gygax?
72 or something.
Yep.
Yeah. So
All right, so moving on to the sort of topic du jour, Chris, you came across a video online, and all of us have been pretty avid students of all the different DM resources out there and finding different ways to spice up your game. Not to sound like an old married couple that's trying to like reinvigorate the bedroom, but like DMs are always trying to tinker and make things move smoothly, especially for, as you mentioned, we're kind of playing with a group of inexperienced players. And so anything we can do to optimize flow and save time, especially in combat rounds, is a godsend. So tell me about this video that you discovered and what started our discussion.
Yeah, sure, man. I actually felt kind of bad about the way that I introduced it into our group chat because I definitely didn't mean to just like drop this thing and then not respond to anything. But I was in the
Change
middle.
up the rules,
yeah,
please.
yeah. I felt really bad because I was like, okay, this is really cool. Let me just like, my idea was basically, hey guys, check this thing out. Let me hear your opinions.
Yeah, just send some feelers.
Yeah, just like, hey, like, let me know pros, cons. Like, do you like this stuff? And it turned into like an all
perfect teacher move.
Yeah, it was the teacher in me came out, and I was just like, hey guys, discuss. So I came across this video, and I feel bad because I can't credit where it's due, but it was a really interesting take on moving combat in a more smooth manner. And the idea the guy came up with dealing with initiative was that everyone rolls their initiative as normal. You take the highest number, and you start there, and then you either move clockwise around the table or counterclockwise around the table for turns. Instead of the usual, as we play, everyone rolls their initiative. We then go through and talk about, it's kind of in the way that I think Matt Colville and Critical Role both do the same way, where they just say who's got these numbers, 25 to 20, so on and so forth.
Right, they've got their whiteboard.
Yeah, exactly, which is exactly what I do. I just write character names, numbers, baddies, numbers, and all that stuff, and then we just go through the list and set up our combat or our event. This idea came about just because we do play with a large group of newish players. At this point, I mean, that we were talking about earlier, I think we're almost at the 50-hour mark, which definitely doesn't make us experts by any means, but our combat is getting smoother and our role-playing is getting more enriched, and the game itself is starting to become more polished. And so as we were kind of tinkering with things that you said, which I definitely agree with, and I'm sure as a DM you do the same thing where you're tinkering and moving things around, this idea came about like, hey, let's move combat faster. And so we threw that into the mix, and everything exploded, which was really cool.
That's why Scott's removed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not allowed to hang out with people anymore.
Yeah. And so it was just I guess kind of circle back around on the question. It was kind of just an idea like, hey, what if we change what we're doing combat wise just to make things go a little faster? And I think that the video even mentions that the main reason they do it is so that there's that, you lose that gap of time where people are going, oh, it's my turn. I do this, instead of like just knowing right away, like, all right, I attack the big ogre in the back of the room or whatever.
Yeah.
Can I jump in right there and say my first rebuttal?
For sure.
I don't think that's going to help at all with the I don't know kind of crowd.
Yeah.
Because if you're paying attention, the only difference is that, like, say in this situation, or going this way, you roll whatever, and it goes this way to me. In that situation, I just have to pay attention to Chris and know that as soon as he goes, I go. But in the same way, if I'm paying attention in the old way where you go by whatever the roll is, I just would have to know as soon as Scott goes, it's my turn. It's not going to help any with the and the uhs and stuff like that, because if you're paying attention to who you have to follow, it doesn't matter in which direction it's coming from. It just matters that you're paying attention.
True. Yeah. Definitely true. And I know that in the chat, people brought up a couple of points that I'm sure we'll touch on in a minute. I thought about what you were saying with that. I don't think that the ultimate goal of switching the initiative procedure is to necessarily close that gap in time where people are going, the guy in the video says that's one of the reasons that he does it. But I think it's just a way of quickly starting combat. You know what I mean? Like,
not breaking the flow.
Exactly. Like when we start combat is supposed to be like a very quick, like the other night in our session, you guys woke up in a room in a dungeon where 4 orcs were coming in that were about to come into the room. And luckily, Andrew's, it's not familiar, it's a pet, I guess, right? Stromthar, yeah. So your pet Raven was on call or on duty and noticed the orcs coming in, came back, warned you guys, and you were able to set up for the fight. Then they came in the room, and instead of combat starting after one roll, we all rolled, and then with these 4 baddies plus the 7 player characters, we had to then stop, get everything organized, and then start combat. It might be more fluid sometimes into combat, just to be like, hey, who's got the highest roll? Okay, you're going, and then we're going counterclockwise. And then combat can just start. And it may be a situational thing. That's how I kind of thought about it afterwards.
It would still be the exact same situation of everybody has to roll, and then you have to see what everybody's roll is. It would still be like, you still have to ask, like, either what is everybody's roll?
Yeah.
Or I guess you could just start off with who has 25 and higher.
That's right.
In which case it would only save you about 15 seconds.
True. But that 15 seconds can be a lot of, like, more combat, you know what I mean?
If you think about how many encounters you have in a single session, that's like, 20 seconds an encounter.
Well, if you want to save even more time, then just don't even roll. Just pick someone. Just point at them and go, all right, your start.
We could.
And I think, and people are going to jump on me for this, but this is one of those situations where D&D 4E kind of had it right, especially for newer players. There's a lot of that, like...
4E, that's a great statement.
I know. So, 4E was like a crutch for most people because, you're sitting there and everyone's got these powers that, for better or worse, that's like all you can do on your turn. And so no matter what happens, whether you were paying attention or not, that if you're the rogue, it's like, well, I guess I'm going to sneak attack because that's what I do. Like there, you don't, in 5e and in, 3.5 and 2 and original D&D, you have so many options on your turn that, you start getting people thinking tactically and there's definitely some people here that are more guilty of playing tactician than others, but
are you referring to my rope?
But
150 feet of it.
This is true.
And maybe we could use something because you use the egg timer sometimes to quash discussion between players when we're kind of going back and forth about what we're going to do. Maybe that's something that we need to bring up on combat turns is like, hey, you've got a minute to make a move.
To make your move, and then after that you get skipped and we can come back. Yeah, where did I read that? It was off of a Reddit thread that talked about that one of the things you can do to make combat go faster is, and it's kind of,
it's cruel in a way.
Yeah, it's cruel and harsh in a way, but you can say, we'll come back to you.
I'm totally fine with that.
Oh, so I think I saw that post too. Yeah, just, do you mind if I come back to you?
Yeah.
And then go back and then readdress what their move was going to be.
And so
it makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, I guess lore-wise, because if you take that long to decide what you're doing, you're essentially holding your turn.
You hesitate.
But there's a mechanic in the game to do that. you can say I hold my action.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
The problem is that, and I'm trying to think of it from like a metagaming point of view. If I know that what I want to do is based off of what some other people are going to do, then maybe I just go, maybe I don't know what to do right now. Come back to me. And then all of a sudden you're taking these opportune moments to do things rather than having to make the action in that moment. You know what I mean?
Well, if you're holding for a specific action, don't you have to specify what that action is?
Yeah, that's my
like
point.
You can't be like and then bide your time, it passes you, and then let's say the orc steps out from behind a rock, and then you say, okay, I shoot my bow. Like
right.
That's not.
And that's kind of what I'm saying is that I think that skipping means that we're going to come back to you with no plan, meaning you can wait for like something to occur that you didn't know was going to unfold and then strategically take advantage of that.
Gotcha.
Versus saying, I hold my action until. I think if we're going to skip someone, then it should force them into saying, like,
they would lose their turn.
Yeah. Or
it just puts them at the bottom of the pecking order. Like they hold until the end of.
Could do that too. But again, it lets them sit and metagame, which most of us are very good at not doing. But it's hard not to because all of us most of us come from video game backgrounds where you metagame the entire event.
Figure out the
How do I get this number to match this threshold so that I can beat this encounter?
If I wear these shoulders on Tuesday and kill this ghost, I get
a key that gets me these shoulders, which means I can beat this boss. So I think it's I don't know, it's a tricky. It's funny because I thought it was such a innocuous comment just to say, hey, what do you guys think about changing up initiative order? And then it really did open up this just onion of rage, of problem.
A nasty, hairy onion.
It's like each layer we pull back, I'm like, shit, that's a good point. And like, why didn't I like, that's a really good point. Why didn't I think of that? And yeah, it's cool. I like talking about it.
But these are the kind of discussions that I think are, that Mike Merles intended when he wrote 5e. Because, I mean, in the DMG, you've got like a whole subsection dedicated to just alternative rules. Like, if you don't want to use spell slots, you can use spell points. If you don't want to, roll damage for a horde of minions, you can do mob tactics and things like that. Yeah. So, I mean, it's not, I don't think it's a constructive discussion to have.
For sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
And I definitely agree with you in that it's good to have these talks, like to hash out what rules, not necessarily break, but what rules you want to incorporate, what ones you don't, because we don't use like rations, we don't use water, we don't use weight, so it's already a homebrew game. But it's still good to talk about the other rules and see how you want to custom tailor it to your group and see what you want to do. Like spell slots versus spell points, that's a big thing. Whole continents that don't exist.
Well, and I think right now especially too, we are just starting out, a lot of us, and so learning the game, it's fun to collaboratively design the content around what we're doing and what works well. And like I certainly don't have any like preconceived framework that I want the game to exist in, because this is really my first time DMing a full like campaign, as far as not just doing like one or two things and then being like, oh, well, maybe next time. This has been definitely the longest story that we've been working on together as a group that plays together. And so being able to change rules on the fly and be fluid with stuff, like, I think that's the best part of D&D, especially probably 5e is more able to do that. But then again, I haven't done that much research into the game rules of 4 and 3 and beyond. It's just that 5e tends to be more simplified, at least than where 4 had gotten, when it had gotten kind of bloated out with rules. And so 5 definitely simplifies things. I like being able to change things. It's good.
That was one thing I liked about. I've never actually played 3.5. I've just read through all the rules and compared it to how we play in 5e. There's a lot about 3.5 I like just by how in depth it is. So I would love to incorporate some of that stuff. I never really read much of 4e other than it was not exactly a favorite. I've read the stuff that people disliked about it. That's about it.
There's plenty of that.
And they're very vocal.
The thing I liked about 3.5 was that it spelled everything out. If you're doing this, this happens. If you're doing this, this is what you do. This is what you rolled. It made it very simplistic, especially for like new players like us and people who don't know the rules back to front, like most players don't. you know what you have to do versus theater of the mind. Oh, what do I do here and how would I do this? So that was one aspect of it that I really enjoyed, or I really liked reading about with 3.5, and it's the same with Pathfinder, and they spell it out for you.
Well, see, and that's where I got to disagree with you, because my experience, when I was in high school, everyone was playing like Vampire and White Wolf, and I thought it was like sex clubs. So of course I stayed away from that.
No, thank you.
So the first
really
D&D that I played, the first D&D that I played was 3.5 when I was a freshman in college, and the rules are so robust and so complicated that like you basically have to have a PhD student sitting there as like your guy that you have to talk to for every rule. What I love about 5e is that it puts so much of it in the DM's hands. And if there's a discussion at the table, ultimately the discussion ends at the table, because you can just say, all right, fine, you have disadvantage on the roll.
Yeah.
Do it, but you have advantage.
Yeah.
It's things like that. Just the quick, like we're gonna break it down to just ability scores.
Yeah.
And I know I've been guilty of this when I've been DMing for you guys. It's like I'm still in that 3.5 mode where I'm like, okay, give me a reflex save. And you guys kind of look at me like, what? Oh, I'm sorry, dexterity save. In 3.5, your reflex save was your dexterity save. Your fortitude save was your constitution save. So it's like they've made it a lot simpler in 4e and 5e, just by cutting out the middleman and saying like, look, this is the thing that's associated with your ability score.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like 3.5 was a lot more of, this is the game you're playing. If you don't know the answer, look it up. 5e is kind of like, here's a guideline.
Yeah.
Have fun.
Go play.
If you don't know the answer, make it up.
Make it up.
And that's exactly right. Here's your game. Go play. Have fun.
Yeah.
And I definitely see the value in 5e. I just like the structure of 3.5.
And I agree with you that 3.5 is a lot of fun, just because there is, we can still do the same thing in 5e, but, like, I don't remember whose campaign it was, but I had my rope, and I threw it over a chimney with a grappling hook.
Every campaign. The answer is every campaign.
Charlie, when you, I think if we're thinking about the same thing.
It was, somebody was a paladin. That was the time that Scott was a paladin, and we tortured somebody.
Charlie's campaign. We were in a tavern. Everybody was fighting. Andrew went around back, threw his rope up on the roof, climbed up the roof. Everybody fought, went down to the basement. We all remember this very well.
Yep.
So it was a good plan.
I will say you derailed Charlie's entire campaign with your rope when you grappled down his big bad guy, and then we just slowly, over like 10 rounds, killed him with level 1 characters because the grappling rules were weird.
that only happened because of a gross misunderstanding of how grappling works.
Agreed. And in a series of actually really good rules, I think you rolled like out of your 6
like above
rolls,
15 every time.
And I think 3 of your 6 were 20s. Like you just kept hitting that 20s, and Charlie was like, "Well, all right, I guess you do it."
We beat the big bad end guy in the tutorial.
Yeah, it was a misunderstanding of the grappling.
We beat him, and then he was like, "That's it, I'm done."
It was Charlie's prologue to his epic story, and we just destroyed it.
30 chapters.
I still feel bad about that, because I'm sure that story is amazing. But
we went over there,
killed the bad guy. It was like, oh, sorry, man. It was fun.
Oh god, it was great. But yeah, in that exact kind of situation, like with the somebody at the table decides to do something, in 5e you kind of just pick what it is, which is fine. It's fun.
Yeah.
But I like the aspect of 3.5 where it's like, this is exactly what you're rolling for. And
it's consistent.
Yeah. But I
appreciate that.
Yeah, but I tend to, I guess, side with Stephen more with the idea that 3.5 almost locks you into the gameplay and the mechanics and the rules. And like Scott said, like unless you have that encyclopedic knowledge of those rules, the game gets derailed because you're constantly like referencing back to like the complicated mechanic that you're trying to pull off. Whereas in 5e, it's like, I don't know what happened. Like, what do we do? And then ultimately it just comes down to table discussion or the DM just saying, no, like you were saying, like, okay, you can do it, but you have disadvantage because you can't do a backflip and shoot your crossbow at the same time because that's crazy. Yeah. You don't have that type of dexterity or whatever it is.
Yeah, the advantage-disadvantage mechanic, I think, is probably the greatest thing. And I know that a lot of people hate it because it is a little OP when having advantage is way more than having a +2 bonus, and it's like mathematically speaking.
Yeah, that's a great point. I never thought about that. I didn't, and to be fair, and I did not know they did not have that in 4 or 3.5. Because like I said, 5e is my first experience with D&D. So that's crazy they didn't have that.
As a rogue, the idea of advantage is awesome because I get all of my stuff from it. But objectively speaking, as the game plays with 5e, I'd much rather see it come from the DM saying, "Oh, you get advantage on this," and not every single player like, "Do I have advantage? Do I have advantage? Can I get advantage on this? What about this? Can I get advantage?"
Yeah.
I'd much rather us just be like, "This is what I want to do. I'm going to do this," and then the DM says, "Go ahead, you get an advantage because of this." Because I feel like advantage is not something that you should get every single time. Like I said, as a rogue, I love that I can get advantage so frequently.
There's a reason that rogues are very popular in 5e.
Yeah.
As an objective player, like it does kind of take away the immersion and the flow of the game to constantly be like, "Oh, I want to do this so I can make sure that I get my advantage." Blah blah blah. Just if I do what I do, I either get advantage or I don't, and I just have to play the character as it's written.
Yeah. That's a good point.
So bringing it back to the discussion of initiative, just now that we've all agreed on something, I figure let's get everyone fighting again. So I had proposed an idea that kind of randomized the order of whether you go clockwise or counterclockwise, based on the second highest initiative roll at the table, and it seemed like that was somewhat well received. Not to toot my own horn, but
No, I think it was. I definitely liked the idea. I thought that, especially because of the issues, then I'll let you talk about your talking points. I don't want to take them from you. The idea that we could now kind of randomly decide based on the highest second roll starts to then get back to the spirit of the game, like you were talking about. And I think I thought it was a cool compromise, to be pretty honest.
So I like it more. I really don't want to come off as argumentative, but
so let me argue.
Yes. I don't want to come off as hostile, but fuck you. No, so the only thing I have against that is it still boils down to like the odd scenario where, let's just say, that probably was very loud on the speaker.
Yeah,
that these two things are also playing, and I don't know. Speaker is DM. I'll figure it out.
Sure.
We all roll. You roll very well, so you go first. But it was a freak roll. Like you're not exactly a quick, speedy person.
Right.
Chris is a quick, speedy person. Scott is a quick, speedy person. And then Speaker's a DM. These two guys are like big hulking ogres. I talked about this exact same scenario in the chat.
I think you did, yeah.
You did.
And then let's say Scott gets the next highest roll. So it would start with you, go Scott's way. DM's in the middle with the two big hulking, two-handed guys going immediately after. And let's just say the marching order, Chris is closer to them. They're going to go straight after the speedy guy. When in reality, if this is a real world scenario, you have the quickest reaction time for some reason, and you go. We didn't discuss what their roll order was, but given that they're big hulking guys, their dexterity is probably pretty low. So I'm going to assume that Scott is above them. Sorry, they go after Scott, not Chris.
Right.
So now Scott has a chance to move and get away from them, thus avoiding the two giant two-handed attacks, which are probably going to pierce his armor class. He could die because of this exact rule, but if we went by actual initiative, he would be able to live.
I definitely see.
That's the same spirit of the game as randomly rolling your initiative murder. If I, being speedy, roll a 1, and Chris, being a big hulking ogre, rolls a 20, he's going to go before me, regardless of whatever. It's still within the spirit of randomization.
But it's not random. If you roll a bad roll, then that's on you. That's completely your fault. Like, I mean, of course, it is still random, but that's because of you. It's because RNGesus is frowned upon.
But so
you.
that's
Whereas
my
before,
point.
It's because you just sat in the wrong spot. It's because of where your chair was sitting.
Yeah,
if
but
you sat on this side of Bayless, you wouldn't have been affected. You would have lived.
So then the next initiative order, Chris rolls really well, and it goes your way, and then you're next as opposed to last because you rolled crappy. Like, it goes both ways. You're only looking at it from the perspective of, if I'm going to get screwed, this is going to be really bad. Not, it could work out in my favor, it could not work out in my favor. It's still a truly random thing. If I roll well and you don't.
But it's not random because it's reliant on more than just yourself.
That's
I mean, if you
the
roll,
definition of random.
if I were to roll a bad roll and be bottom of initiative, then so be it. But if I were to roll a very good roll, but just be sitting in the
Still
wrong
not
chair
quite as
and then
high.
get screwed, that's a totally different situation.
I understand that, and I hear what you're saying.
And demonetized.
Yeah. I was like, crud. Sorry, I didn't mean to derail. I'm trying to say that on you freaking pricks with your hells and your hockey sticks.
And then I'm sitting here and I get screwed.
No,
But my issue with your fear of taking away the randomization of the roll is that it doesn't really affect anything. In fact, like I said in the chat, you can even make the argument that it makes you have to be more involved outside of just the initiative roll. Like if we're walking down the road and you've got Andrew and Morgan talking about beer festival on Sunday, and you've got, Bayless talking with Charlie about, marketing shit.
Huh? Who are these people?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Hogarth and Bruce and Randall and Adriel talking about random things because we're walking down the road and there's no posed threat. And then it's like, okay, roll for initiative. And it's just like, okay, whatever I roll, it doesn't really matter. You know what I mean? Like it kind of makes you have to be a little bit more cautious. Like, okay, well, if we do randomly get into an encounter, there's no guarantee where I'm sitting is going to be the greatest of positions. It could be because it's still random, because at the same time, Chris could roll well, I could roll well, you could roll well. Each person's role and turn in that combat is completely random. But it makes you focus more in the game and makes the flow continue as you're going, because it's like, okay, if we get ambushed or if we're in a combat, I need to be prepared, because if my role, if my seat at this table is screwy, I don't want to get punched in the face because the rogue is in front and he's going to run away and I'm the next best thing.
Yeah.
Well, so if anything, I feel like that makes it more real world, because you are going to be, as a party, if this was the real world, walking down the road, talking, joking, whatever. And then if you get ambushed by a group of people, you're going to rely on the speedy people to do something, whereas the slow people are going to rely on their armor. But with this new system, who gives a shit?
Well, so that's where that's actually, I think that I would disagree with you there. In the case where you're ambushed, this is where we were trying, I think this came up towards the end of the discussion yesterday. Like, if you're ambushed, I don't actually think it's the quick, speedy people who you're relying on to help you. I think at that point, everyone looks at like,
perception.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, exactly. Whoever was saying, I'm looking around, making sure nothing's stalking us. Or if you get truly ambushed and everyone's caught flat-footed, then it's like, you turn to the guy in the army and go, holy shit, help us. Like, you get hit with shit while I try to run around and figure something out. And whether that works out in the initiative order, I think that chaos of not knowing who is going based on your role or whatever, I think that actually plays more into an ambush scenario, which
that's my exact point.
And that's kind of, that's what I was saying. I thought that was your point yesterday, Scott. And I think that's why situationally, like, I might use this tactic for like quick combat. Like, I would never want to use it in
a big boss encounter.
Exactly. Like, say we're like towards the end of our campaign and you guys are going to fight like one of the, mini bosses or whatever, or maybe even like the big baddie. I would never be like, all right, roll, and then we're just going to randomly go around the table. Now, I think at that point, like, especially when you're DMing, you're trying to create tension in that moment. So why not drag out the initiative order? Like, really wait your players out and, build the tension to the fight so that when you step into that arena, you're all ready to fight. And it's not just oh crap, I rolled bad, so now I got to sit here and wait. It's, we all rolled, we're all ready. Let's go get this guy, But if you're walking down the road and some bandits come to fight you, who cares what order the whole group goes in, as long as the guy that rolled first, if you think about it in like kind of like what you guys were saying with like the real world kind of way it would work, whoever rolled the highest would be the first to do something. And then after that, it would be the person nearest to them because they would notice them do it. And so even though it may not be reflected in the marching order, it does kind of play out on the table the same way. You know what I mean?
Then why not do it based on marching order?
I would be fine with that too. If we set up the marching order and just said, boom, here it is. Like, whoever is, you roll initiative, go from there, and then you just start in those directions.
If we were to somehow set up the seating arrangements to reflect the marching order, I think that would be a lot of fun. That would make me feel more
little musical chairs
in it. Yeah,
yeah. As long as people
every
don't
time
mind.
there's a battle, because every time we play at the Malvern, we move to the big table.
Yeah, which we won't be doing in the future, just because I just think it takes people out of the moment. Like it breaks the immersion of the game to like get up and move to the next table.
And I think that's the whole purpose of the video that Chris had sent it wasn't a video about initiative order. It was a video about making the game flow better.
Yeah.
And I think part of the problem that we have is when we go into a big bad boss encounter, we're using everybody's role as their initiative, as Chris said. Is that absolutely right? Because people are in the moment, they're ready, they're pumped, they're amped for it. It's the in between moments when we are walking down the road. I'm not talking the way it plays out in the game is the way it plays out in the game. My thing of it is trying to draw people into the immersion of it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've just got people who are having side conversations and all they've got to do is just throw their initiative, and then that determines them, they've just got to, Chris, but now it's my turn. We've got to find what my objective of it was to find a way to get people involved and immersed in it. And then that way you're paying attention when you are walking down the road to your marching order, and you are paying attention. Oh, I need to be doing scouting checks and I need to be doing this kind of stuff, as opposed to talking about the soccer game that was on last night, as opposed to talking about what you're doing next weekend.
Yeah.
And using this role and then the person going to the left could be used as a tool and not just a default thing. Is like, okay, roll your initiative, and then everybody's like, okay, well, I got 20 in this, so we'll go this way. And Chris is like, nope, we're going left to right because that's how it is. It keeps people on their toes. It could just be used as a tool as opposed to a rule.
Yeah,
I like that.
And it's another reason why I think moving to the other table, we won't do that anymore when we get back over to Malvern. Just because it pulls people out of that immersive state for even that split second, especially in a group that is new and trying to sort of get their feet wet with role playing. Constantly breaking immersion is hard for them to then get back into the spirit of their character. And, for experienced players, it's probably not as much, but even still, I think we all agree that, Stephen, you're probably the best role player in our group.
No, not at all.
You don't think so? Yeah. I'm gonna go ahead and say you are. I think even with somebody with the weird walk. Which, I'll talk about something later about your character that I think is really cool. That just happened by a chance of rolling the die, which was actually neat. But I think even for really good role players, when you physically move from like one environment to the next, it does sort of break that fourth wall. From that. Yeah, to steal a Matt Coville term, it breaks the verisimilitude.
Yeah. Well, I do we've never done this, and I'm stealing this completely from Community, but the whole aspect of like total immersion where we haven't had this happen to us before, but if we get, we kind of have, but we kind of still all sat at the table, where if you get separated from the group, you are physically separated from the actual group.
We've done a pretty good job about doing that when people break into different groups, having like this conversation happens over here. That way, X, Y, and Z didn't hear what that NPC revealed.
Yeah, but we also came back to the table. We did, sat there. So it didn't, player knowledge was separate, and it made character knowledge was separate, and it made player knowledge easier to be separate. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't like a total break. Like you didn't experience like isolation from the other players.
Yeah. Well, and we can definitely do that more in our game. So far, there hasn't been too many instances where the group is split that I can think of off the top of my head, of course. But man, if we want to start moving people around, I'm totally game for that, because I think it's a great way to get people's character knowledge and player knowledge split, make it real, instead of having to force people to pretend they didn't just hear this NPC say this really important piece of lore information. Why not go stand in the other room, especially if we're at Malvern or if we're here at your place, Stephen, where you have a lot of space. You say, hey, go in the next room and we'll call you when we're ready. And I think that's a really cool thing to do too, for sure.
It just helps with immersion.
Agreed. Yeah, man. Anything to keep the force.
Roll's done it a few times. You hear them on the thing where they have a few of the players leave the table, leave the room, and they come back in. It works really well, and I really like the idea of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's obviously you want to keep player knowledge separate from character knowledge, but it gets hard.
It does.
Because I know I've broken that wall before. I'm supposed to not know this, but I'm going to ask questions that lead to the answer that I want to get.
Yeah, like I know where the answer is going to take me. Let me just get there, and there it is.
So tell me about the woods. Oh, there's a big spooky tree. Is there anything weird about that big spooky tree?
Yeah, role-playing in 8 intelligence is probably one of the most difficult things to do.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
But no, I think, with regard to separating players out or initiative order, I think a lot of it just comes down to like that, player DM contract, the social contract that we have with each other, where it's like, if someone does get screwed on a dice roll, whether we're doing clockwise initiative or whether we're, kind of going with traditional initiative, the trust is that the player will trust the DM to know that, like, the ogre isn't smart enough to go and hit the rogue just because they're there and he knows that their turn isn't coming up next.
Mm-hmm.
He is going to go towards the nearest target or whatever target represents the biggest threat to him. And so it's that, as players, you have to trust the DM to not metagame as much as the DM has to trust the players. And I know it's actually harder for a DM to trust the players than for the players to trust the DM, but it does go both ways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, it definitely does, and I agree with that, especially from and I know you DM as well, and Scott, you've DM'd, and I think Andrew, you've DM'd a little, or not yet. Okay, I know you are. I know we've talked about it.
I have a campaign in my head.
Yeah, there we go. So you're on the way there too. It is. I think you put it perfectly, Stephen. It's a social contract between the players, the DM, and really, I would add the table as a whole, because as you're saying, I'm not going to take my, thinking back to the last encounter we did in the dungeon that we're in currently, the 4 ogres that came in, or the 4 orcs that came into the room, we could have run straight at BDT, because I know in my head that he has the lowest AC, the lowest HP, the fewest defensive things, and I could have just had 4 orcs standing there hitting him with hammers right off the bat. But I knew that, like, they didn't see him, they wouldn't go towards this hidden character. It was a lot of things that you have to think about in that moment, that you're not trying to purposefully move the chess pieces, so to speak, to disadvantage the players. And I think that's important.
Sometimes you do.
Sometimes you do.
I'll be honest. I'm guilty of that. Like when in our little campaign, when I realized that Scott was representing a very, very big threat in melee combat, I decided to put you guys against something where you would have to use ranged combat, and it was fun to see you guys solve that problem, because and this is something that as a DM you start to see the patterns that the players take.
Yep.
And so I don't consider it metagaming as much to throw challenges at them that kind of throw them outside of their comfort zone. I think that that's a little different when you're playing long term like that, as opposed to when you're at the table and that they only have 3 hit points left, and you're like, all right,
I go for you. I'm taking you. Yeah. And I agree 100%, because I'm currently doing the same thing with our group, because we have a really large group, and a lot of the encounters that are happening now are quick and are not very dangerous, so to speak. And that's good, because I think you guys, are 3rd level right now? Level 3?
We're still level 3. Yeah.
So it's going to be fun to see as things ramp up. Like, I've already started tweaking things to deal more with the group. Like Shomik, who plays Therian in our game, who is a sorcerer.
Draconic origin.
Yeah, exactly. Loves to use the sleep spell. It's his go-to maneuver when we encounter a group.
Yep.
Every time.
Rope.
And so I it is Shomik's rope. Some guys come at you. I cast sleep. Damn it. So I've already been reading up on like that mechanic, and I've kind of figured out a way around it, and I think that it's going to be fun to see. Yeah, exactly. Oh no! All of a sudden, some things show up that are immune to sleep. Oh, or any other charms. Oh no!
Your Warforged. We metagamed your Warforged out.
Yeah.
When I cast Mage Hand and got a crit 20 on stealing his steel cell.
Yeah.
No.
That was,
and my Barbarian just became super overpowered.
Oh man, yeah, no, you marked my game with rope as well when you tied a werebear up in an outhouse and set it on fire.
Wow, see, rope is great.
rope is
something.
OP.
The OP rope. But I definitely agree with you that it's a fine line that DMs run where you're creating encounters for your party so that they feel the danger of the world and they feel like, this could tilt on a knife's edge, especially later into the game. Like, it gets more dangerous as you are moving through levels. And of course the game builds in safety nets that allow you to, recover higher level characters as opposed to lower level characters. Mm-hmm. But as a DM, you start to learn your party and you start to learn like what they're going to do tactically. And then it does become like we were just talking about, and you said it really well, like sometimes you do move those chess pieces in a way that you're putting your players at risk, and you say, can you figure this puzzle out? Like, unless you want your world to be very, railroad, Care Bear, just, hey, you guys are going to make it. Yeah, you're playing through a book. Sometimes you have to put that death imminent.
Back one of the worst things to listen to is a podcast or Dungeons and Dragons podcast. I listen to probably too many of them, where there's never fear that the character's ever going to die. You just go into it and it's just like, oh, they're going to win, and it's not as exciting, it's not as fun, and I can't imagine being a player at that level, because a lot of them are in like their 10th, 11th, 12th levels.
Yeah, I think at that point, especially at that point, like when you guys get to 10th or 11th level, if we get there in years to come, or hopefully like sooner and later than that, like I almost think it becomes the DM's job to actively try and kill you, because if the encounter is not that, without like, 9 ancient, black dragons show up. Now what? It's like all right.
Happened in Charlie's campaign.
Yes, exactly.
Well, and to
giant meteor crashes. Make a dex save. 19. You're dead.
To Scott's point, it goes back to that player engagement thing. And if you feel like you're being handheld, you're not going to be engaged, and you're not going to pay attention when your turn rolls around. If you are, being actively threatened, then it behooves you to actually pay attention to what the DM is saying. And
I love those battles and like the challenges that you actually have to think about and like really plan out the actions that each class is good for, everything like that. Like from the last session where someone was doing very quick actions and not exactly playing to how the game should be played, that kind of takes you out of it. Yeah. But like the one where you're actually challenged and like you said, you feel like you might die this time, and you really have to think together. Like, I'm a ranger, why don't I cast a smoke screen over here to shield you? You're immune to smoke because you're going to be casting an AoE spell through the smoke.
Yeah.
And you really have to plan out based on class, based on skill, based on cooldown. That is, to me at least, what's most fun. Like when it's very, very challenging.
Agreed. And I think that is important. I think every, maybe not every combat, but at least every couple of sessions, a campaign needs like that Ned Stark moment where something happens where you go, oh shit, we can all die. Everyone is fair game. We're all dead. Like I think that is one of those things that I'm hoping to, and of course it's all random. Like the dice roll could go the other direction and it may not happen, but I'm hoping that in our campaign that event does take place. I've tried to set it up, to kind of pull the curtain back a little bit. It has been set up a few times to occur, and then the dice rolls went the opposite direction, or somebody made a great save, or our players were creative and thoughtful and intelligent and bypassed it. And I was like, well, okay, maybe next time. And so, it's been cool to see that. But yeah, I'm looking forward to our first Ned Stark getting his head chopped off moment where everybody kind of goes, oh, shit.
We almost had it with Morgan.
I know.
But that was more of a suicide.
She did go in on her own on that. But I think that that would have been one of those moments, too, where it's like, oh, well, yeah, okay, he is going to kill her. Like, people, like, no one's guaranteed to make it through.
To die.
She was. Luckily, we fixed that.
Yeah. That was so funny. We had that whole elaborate trap set up outside, and then she Leroy Jenkins and just ran into the camp.
She was just like, I'm going in. I was like, all right. This is how this is going.
And to her credit, she played it off as a crisis of faith, and then it ended up being a big pivotal moment for the character, which was
yeah,
really
lore-wise, it's now awesome.
Right.
I love it.
Yeah,
it's brilliant.
But it was in the moment we were all like,
what are you doing?
So suicide, all right.
I guess she's done playing.
No, she's not going to play anymore. Yeah, but it did work out, and the story for it worked out really good. really well.
It's now an awesome backstory.
Oh, it's great. And that's one thing I will credit our whole group with, which kind of is a tangent. I know we've sort of been zooming all around our topic here, but I think that what I really enjoyed with our group is the depth to which people have given their characters like personality. And it's really cool to see. Like I love reading the backstories that everybody shared with me. I've loved trying to weave them in certain places. I love the creativity of our group. Like, Stephen, your story is great. I love it. Like when you sent it to me the first time, I was just like, oh my God, dude, yes, you need to play with us. And like,
Hoggle's the best character.
Hogarth is still my favorite. It's one of my favorite characters that has been in
Need
our
Hogarth
campaign.
back.
Hogarth is going to be fun to have on the 30th. Which I know I've already told you this, so it's not uncommon knowledge, but your carousing story from the Elven city that you guys were in before you went up to this mountain that you're currently in, let me just say that you are now part of the local legend of that town because of your carousing. I'll tell you more about that, obviously, when you are back and you guys maybe go back to that Elven town, because
you're like the Elven Genghis Khan.
You're like Podrick, but if Podrick had a bigger penis.
Oh,
if that makes sense.
But his name is Try Podrick.
Yeah, exactly.
Famous.
My point.
Famous among all the women of the Elven town and a few men.
Sometimes some
Steve?
people.
Are you talking about Steve? Get fuck away from Steve.
You don't want to mess with Thranduil's boy.
Oh man,
that's too funny, man.
Oh, I'm excited to get back into it.
It's gonna be fun. We're excited to have you back. It's when the whole group is together, there's a cool chemistry about it that is really fun, and it's really fun to DM it and really just let you guys, create the story, which is really what D&D is, right? Like just collaborative storytelling, and it's neat to sit back and let you guys tell the story while I just kind of shape it around a framework of ideas that I have, which is fun.
I definitely agree with that. That to me, at least, D&D is more about. I think that's why I like 5e so much more. Like I like going back to what we were talking about earlier. I like some of the structure of 3.5 where it's like these are the rules, this is how you're playing. But I really like 5e because it is way more open, and it's just it feels more like an exercise in improv than anything. Like we're all just hanging out, we're having fun. It's an excuse to hang out with friends, drink, joke, laugh. And then there's a structure of a shared story that we're all building. Yeah. So not only do we have inside jokes from just hanging out, but there's a whole separate layer of jokes that we only understand because we know the backstory of it. Like if somebody was hanging out here and I was like, I don't know, let's just say Hogarth's cock had a shrinking spell or something, and we're like, so how are you dealing with this new lifestyle change? Nobody would get it, but because we know the backstory of it, like it creates like all these inside jokes for a whole second life. And the one I think about a lot, just because I had no plan of it, and I'll be honest, like when this whole thing came to fruition in the session, it was because I was really drunk. And I was like, this sounds fun.
The best ideas.
Whoa. Hold on.
You know what I'm going to talk about.
You're drinking?
I know. Sorry. I know. Oh, I almost broke all your wine. The scene at Yulia Abbey where...
Oh, the red
where Lute, Flute, and Belly Pink was born. That was all... None of that was scripted or written down. I had no plan for that. I was just like... look, they just finished, like, I forget what you guys had just finished.
You just beat a cave or something.
You just, cleared a cave. You would kill the ogre. It was like the tutorial. Yeah, and then you guys got to the Abbey and you partied like you just blew up the Death Star. You're like, yeah, we're rolling. And, I just remember you guys role played that so perfectly. And it was one of those moments where you just sit back and you just kind of watch you guys do it. And it was like, oh yeah, this is fun. This is why I love D&D so much. Because it was just cool collaborative storytelling. And I know you and I still... To get to your inside joke point, we'll be joking around and I'll just we'll be talking about whatever. I'll be like, oh yeah, it's like Lute, Flute, and Belly Pink, and you're like, oh yeah. It's just it's just to your points. It's a very unique. It's a unique game, but it's just a unique thing that that we do. It's cool.
I like it.
Yeah, man. Lute, Flute, Belly Pink.
That was we got back. We cleared the cave.
You guys had cleared the cave.
Played what was that song? It was like And I lost my way.
Yeah, it was the Dropkick Murphys sailing up to Boston, and it was perfect. And you guys are just like, and
you guys were playing your instruments.
Yeah,
and I was
then
that night.
Yeah, you were. That's when you came from.
I'm gonna play my music. Yeah, like you don't have an instrument. You're like, and then I rolled a 20. What do you play? I play my belly.
Yeah, I think that's when you guys came from the festival, because that was the night that Morgan was just. Not with it.
She checked out.
No, that was the night that I came over and I had to go back to work, and we had just saved the dragon or something like that.
Yeah, it was when you guys met Thrask.
Shomik wasn't there. Right. That's right.
Yeah, Shomik wasn't there.
Yeah,
and he was super pissed because he missed the only dragon we've seen so far. And he was just like, "How did I miss the dragon?" I was like, "Dude, sorry, man."
It wasn't his chromatic
alignment anyway. Nah, it wasn't. Not even close. Which
that
is
was
interesting.
Such a fun event.
Yeah, it was fun, man. It was cool. But yeah, totally
like
just
30 minutes of actual partying.
Oh, dude, it was. I just sat there. I didn't do anything. Like you guys you literally put on a show. I was like, all right.
I got into a huge fight with an Adriel Purist about.
It was like a real in moment after.
But they did not find them, which was really cool.
Yeah, it was.
There's a lot of people in our group who have things in their bags that. They're not hidden things, but they've
at this point it's
forgotten.
No one remembers.
So like I'm kind of going back through the stories right now, and I'm making a list of like items that I'm just going to remind people that they have, just because of the fractured way we play. Like sometimes it's a couple of months between sessions. Like shit, I wouldn't remember.
Yeah.
And so we're going to go back and I'm going to say, hey, like by the way,
especially if you take really good notes, you might write it in a section that you didn't expect to write it in.
Right. Exactly.
Let's say it's a magical item that has a spell property about it.
Yeah.
You might write it underneath your spells as opposed to underneath your inventory.
Right,
and then,
exactly.
Whoop, it's gone.
That's where D&D Beyond is pretty awesome.
It is.
Thanks, Shomik.
Shomik coming through clutch. Plus, dude, the best thing about D&D Beyond was the switch that they recently made, or not recently anymore, but it was right around March, because it was right about when my productivity at work went like.
Yep. They
allowed you to sign in with a Google account instead of a Twitch account. And I was like, yep, bypassing every firewall. Click. So I've done a lot of work on the campaign using all the stuff, which is cool.
We should caveat that by saying we have all paid for all of the content that we get from D&D.
For sure, definitely. We all paid
for it.
We have paid for all of the books. I have all of them.
With blood, sweat, and dollars.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Actually just picked up the new Ghost of Saltmarsh, man. I've been reading through it. It's pretty sweet. It's over here.
Yeah, you want to...
This has got the
I'll
cool...
be the Vanna White.
There you go. You can Vanna White that.
I have a little bear on the front of it. Is that what it is?
No, it's not a bear, bro.
I can't say...
How did you get a bear out of that? How terrifying is your childhood?
It's like a shark human.
First of all, I can't see what's on this thing. I'm trying to remember back to what I saw on
I gotta
Reddit.
say, the inside picture is my favorite picture of maybe any D&D book. Just because it's like, it's a little fish person with a seal as a little pet puppy. And that just cracks me up. Like, that's hilarious. Because in my head, I never thought that, like, fish people don't have pets. But as soon as I thought it, I was like, yeah, fish people would definitely have seals as dogs.
Yeah,
like,
why would they not?
That just makes sense.
They're already water dogs.
Yeah, right? They're already water pups, so hey, whatever. That's too funny. Man.
So I want to dive into sort of our next topic, which, Scott, I know I've mentioned this to you previously, but Andrew, Chris, I think that, we were kind of talking about this earlier, and bringing up Ghost of Saltmarsh, with the
I like your style here.
Yeah, I dig it. With all the content that's coming out for 5e, 5e's almost 10 years old now. We're probably anticipating the launch of 6e, although I really hope that they don't do that. I hope that they just kind of keep everything open source and then continue to produce, supplemental content.
Yeah.
And what's taken off lately is crowdfunding content, not just for D&D, but for board games in general. So, I mean, like I've shown you guys this guy from Steamforged Games, the Dungeons and Doggies. This Kickstarter was super successful, just dog miniatures. And then they also released with it a PDF for rules to play as dog characters in D&D.
Yeah.
I believe the Cats and Catacombs is still available for pre-order, so...
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Might be happening.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, that's something that was a Kickstarter exclusive. We've talked about these guys just came out. The or well, at least my copies have come in. The Critical Role, Vox Machina, and Mighty 9 miniatures from Steamforge Games. Steamforge is cleaning up on Kickstarter. I'll just throw that out there.
Sure.
And then I've talked a lot about the Kickstarter board game Dire Wild that I'm a big fan of. Yeah, that's a huge box. I don't even know if we can fit this guy out here. There we go.
Is this a message from our sponsors?
Yeah,
exactly right. But first,
MeUndies is a great.
So I wanted to get your guys' opinion. I wanted to get your guys' opinion on, crowdfunding and whether you believe that is sort of the future of the board game economy, because while it does end up hurting a lot of the local game stores that kind of made gaming great, it does, the capitalist in me is like, this is awesome because consumers, they want a particular product, they want a touch of class to add to their D&D 5e game, they want a new board game that has these types of mechanics.
Well, so does Amazon.
There you go. But, you're kind of cutting out the having to find an investor and a publisher, and, you're going direct to the customers. Do you guys feel like that is a good thing for the gaming industry, or...
So
Andrew, you
my first question is, why do you think it cuts out or is detrimental to the local gaming store? I don't feel as though crowdfunding a game is any different than going to a publisher, getting it published, and then selling it to it. The gaming stores are still going to be buying it through the same routes. True. If anything, it's going to be cheaper because they don't have to deal with a publisher. They just have to deal with, I guess, still a publisher.
But see, I'm not going to go to the gaming store and buy Dire Wild anymore because I already got my copy.
Gotcha.
So they're kind of going direct to consumer and kind of cutting out.
On the other hand,
they do offer retailer packages. I've noticed a lot of these Kickstarters, they do have get 16 copies of the game at a reduced rate if you're a retailer. But, how many people are doing that versus how many people are buying the individual games? I'd like to see the numbers on that.
That would be interesting.
On the other hand of that, I never put any money towards Dire Wild. I'm not going to get it from Kickstarter. But if it were to raise enough money from those people crowdfunding it, saying, I like this, giving more money to it so they can actually distribute it, then it could get to One-Eyed Jacks. I could see it. I could buy it. I could play it. I could recommend it. It gets spread that way. So I don't necessarily view it as a detriment to local stores, because the people who are going to go into the local stores aren't necessarily going to be the ones who buy it from Kickstarter. They're just going to be going in there to get it. If anything, it's just going to hurt publishers, which I'm fine with.
Yeah.
Forget them.
So doesn't Kickstarter also, once it reaches their goal, they stop selling it to people through Kickstarter?
Incorrect. They keep going. You can, I mean, that's how, you end up getting these crazy Kickstarters where you're raising $2 to $4 million for something. And there have been predatory practices on that. I don't know if you guys were familiar with the Terminator 2 board game, officially licensed and everything. Some scuzzy game company, they created the Kickstarter campaign like, hey, we're making a Terminator 2 board game. And they made almost $1 million and then never delivered it. And it's like, Kickstarter's policy is it's not shopping. If you back a project,
and then it goes under.
Buyer beware,
Yeah.
So there's no protections for consumers there. But of course, if you go over your goal, that's just extra cash in hand. And of course, the economics of scale show that, if I know that I need $8,000 to make 500 copies of a board game, then $10,000 will end up getting me 800 copies of the board game, just because, print runs are so much easier when you have large quantities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that the Kickstarter route, I definitely like the idea of removing the middleman, because I think that a lot of entertainment today suffers from a guy in a suit or a girl in a suit in a room saying,
it's 2019.
Yeah, 2019, guy or girl. A person in a
capitalist.
Room. Thank you.
Did you just assume my CEO?
Oh, man, now, okay.
Welcome to Trump's America, guys.
So they assume that someone in a room is looking at this thing and going, yeah, that sucks. That's never going to work, right? And I think that this has been proven to be a myth at some point along the line, but there was that rumor that Stranger Things was shopped to every major network and every major movie house, and they all said, "No, this is stupid. Get out of here." Netflix said, "Yeah, what the hell? Like,
I mean, they're printing
come on
money
in."
on Netflix.
Yeah, seriously,
Yeah.
they're playing with Monopoly money. They're like, "Yeah, come on in. We'll make it. What do you want to shoot? Upside down world? Whatever. Get in here.
Fuck it.
Fuck it. Demogorgon? What the hell is that? Yeah, whatever. Some kids in a basement playing Dungeons and Dragons? Psh, sure."
Shaverhead.
We got a 3-hour video of a train ride from
Yeah,
Oslo to
we're
Norway.
good.
We don't give a shit.
Yeah,
Come in
come
here.
on in. And then
Someone's watching it.
yeah, exactly right. And then all of a sudden, like, it explodes into this cultural phenomenon because you removed that person that was looking at like Q ratings and, you know, all these like trends of television, which are all bullshit because
It's
you know,
super subjective.
it's totally subjective, man. Like, as a consumer of entertainment, we want stuff that we like.
Mhm.
And we want genuine stuff. And I actually think that is a lot of why D&D in general has become so popular.
Yeah.
Is that genuine factor of like
Authenticity.
that's the word, authenticity. People want authentic experiences. And so I think Kickstarter is the most free market capitalist thing you could possibly have. Like, hell yeah, man. Tear down all the major gaming companies because I don't give a shit if the CFO from Hasbro has to sell, you know, his stock shares because some guy made an incredible game that he is now selling to the public.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what a great vector by which to get entertainment out to people by skipping the middleman.
Yeah, I don't look it up on Hasbro. I look it up on Board Game Geek.
Yeah,
Right,
exactly.
exactly.
Man. You're like, oh, let me check this out. Yep, got it.
6.5 deal.
Yeah, shit, I'm in. And it's like, I think
not going to play it for 4 years.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. I'm buying into it now. But I also think that it's good marketing. Like,
yeah,
to incentivize people like that's it. I forget which economist said it, but economics boils down to incentives.
Mm-hmm.
You're just trying to get people to make a choice. Like the guy recently, Joseph Stolitz, I think is his name, just won 2 years ago the Nobel Prize on the nudge theory. How do we get you from behind the line to just over the line of that decision, right? Kickstarter does that. It's a perfect real world example of nudge theory because it's showing like, hey, at this level, you get like 2 miniatures. At this next level, though, you get 4 miniatures. And if you go a little further, you get 6 miniatures, one of which you get to customize. Like, they're nudging you into these higher categories of paying. That's the market, man. That's perfect free market, like, economics.
I do like that, but the one thing I dislike about it, so argumentative,
You're okay.
is that to me it feels kind of predatory, just in the aspect that it's like
practices.
For taking that exact example, like if you pay $5, you get 2 miniatures. If you pay $7, you get 4. If you pay $15, then you get 6, and one of them you can customize.
Sure.
Like in that exact same situation, it could be viewed as predatory because they're not. It costs them like 5 cents to make each miniature, and then to customize it, maybe $1. But they're doing a 700% markup on that thing, which free market, great. They're able to make a 700% markup. That is fantastic for them. But from somebody on the other side, it just feels like you don't need to do that aspect of it. You could say for $5 you get 2, for 6 you get 10. Fuck it.
Well, but it's no different than going to a car dealership and they show you all the options for your car and you watch the price go up and up and up. At some point you go, you know what? I don't want to spend that much. Like, we all have our buying threshold.
Right. And I do like that, like being able to get more for paying more and all of that whole open market aspect. But the
one thing you get from Kickstarter that you don't get at a car dealership is FOMO. You know, if you don't get the stereo on this car, that's fine because you can always get it on the next one. But with Kickstarter, they always hit you with exclusives and they say, this is the one chance you're ever going to get this product, and it's like,
if you don't pay the $20 now, you are never ever going to get this tinfoil coated miniature.
And that's not everybody. That's not everything. You know, Indiegogo and Kickstarter, they're bad actors everywhere. And you know, you could say the same thing about like, you know, even big companies. Like it's not even just
look at what happened in Fallout 76.
Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah. There you go.
$250 for a canvas bag. Yeah. Psych, it's a tarp.
Psych, it's not a bag.
Fuck you. We're Bethesda.
Thanks for your money. We're gonna make Skyrim 6, but it's just gonna be Skyrim.
What are you gonna do? Not buy it?
Yeah.
As soon as you step out of the vault, it's Skyrim 5. You've been asleep a long time.
You've been asleep a long time, friend. Where are you coming from? Did you just try to cross the border?
Crossing the border, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Like, no. Like,
Todd Howard's done it again.
Todd Howard, you genius.
My ancestors smile on me.
What do they say to you, Mario?
Yeah.
What? No. I'm on the Switch.
This is not what I want. Oh man, that's so funny.
Yeah.
But I do think. I think that overall we are moving towards a more gig-based economy, and I think major companies are already transitioning their models to adapt within the gig economy. Like we already see like Verizon, Comcast in our area bumping up prices for their internet packages because they know everyone's cutting out their cable and going straight to internet. So everyone's like, so they're just like, well, cool, we'll just bump up our internet prices so that it matches the difference. And then we don't give a shit what you do because we're still going to make money hand over fist because we're the only game in town. We also see it though. Yeah, right. Google Fiber. But we also see
Please Google, if you're listening.
Stop the Stadia is a terrible idea. Start laying some cable.
Yes. Whoever, if any of our Google executives are listening right now, which you probably are because some of us have Google phones. So, but I do think that Kickstarter, it just
hey Google.
I think
fix your shit and expand.
I do think
and bring back the do no evil.
Let's get back to that.
Yeah.
But I think Kickstarter plays into that new modern economy way of doing things, where I don't need to be a company in a garage starting out and printing off things like that. I can just be a dude in my house with an idea and let me see if I can gain capital, and not from capitalists who are trying to invest in a company that they can then take like a partial majority or partial ownership of, not partial majority, partial ownership of. Like, hey, like the Vox Machina animated
cartoon
special.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, what did they raise? Like $10 million in 3 days?
What?
Outrageous.
Dude, if they had tried to ship that around, people would have been like, no.
And you know what? I wouldn't want the Cartoon Network Cal Arts crowd to do it because it would have been garbage. Like, I don't want to see Steven Universe swinging a sword. Like, I just don't.
Exactly. Don't need to see that. When Johnny Bravo was Grog.
The great thing about Kickstarter is that you may have touched upon while I was on call, but it gives, like Chris just said, the guy in his garage the ability to have an idea where he doesn't have somebody being like, well, maybe if you did it this way, we may be able to get more money. So we have a character, you know what I mean? We have this aspect. He's like, no, this is what I want my fucking game to be.
Yeah.
This is what I want it to do. If people like it, they'll invest.
And a lot of it is the democratization of technology, because as 3D printers become more affordable, as home printing equipment becomes more affordable, as streaming equipment becomes more affordable, these gateways, like, you know, the barrier to entry is so low that a guy in his garage could start a multi-million-dollar company if he has a good enough idea.
Yeah,
and that's how it was like in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s.
Pretty much until the 80s.
Yeah, and then the mega corporations happened.
And they put
then they started focusing on lowest common denominator. Like, not what can you make niche money off of. And going back to Stranger Things, I think that's where Netflix excels.
Yes.
Is they don't care about lowest common denominator. That's why so much of what Amazon... Sorry if this gets you all your money taken away from you. So much of what Amazon puts out is just absolute shit.
Yeah.
Because they're basically putting out CBS primetime sitcoms
They
without a laugh
They are.
track.
They
and
are.
it's fucking garbage.
It is.
Well, whereas Netflix puts out niche markets, they know what people like, they know what people watch, they know what people watch more than once, which is a huge
You're not afraid
factor.
to lose money on it.
They have their analytics squad working overtime on that.
Yeah, they know that they have
Definitely.
people paying money regardless, and they're like, okay, these people watch, like, what was that show? Love, Sex, and Robots. They switched up the episode order based on what you thought or what they thought you would prefer. there were like 3 or 4 different orders that the episode came in based on what your watch order was. So they specified that show to what would get you interested, what would keep you going, what would get you hooked, and then what you would just continue watching.
That's crazy.
Wow. And I think that is, to me, I mean, some people might be scared about that, but I really like that aspect of it because it's giving, like you guys said, power back to the people to be like, let's try this.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, let's see what happens if we make a movie about a girl who's taken over by a monster.
Yeah.
Or let's make a movie
Black Mirror, Choose Your Own Adventure.
Yeah, Boulder Dash or not Boulder Dash.
10 years ago, television would never even thought of doing that. No, it was all the same cookie cutter shit.
Yeah, that would be like you have to have 10 million.
I'm going to challenge that because in the 1980s, you guys might not know of this, but there was a television program known as Captain Power and the Soldiers of the Future. You guys familiar with this one?
Not even.
I haven't heard of it.
30 years ago, or did I say 10 years ago?
This was 30 years. This was back in the 80s, man. So here's the thing: 10. Captain Power and the Soldiers of the Future was
not 10 years ago.
No, but go ahead. I know. What
no. So this show was amazing. You know, it was like low budget, but kind of midday. It was like early Power Rangers, right? So one of the things that they came out with, and this was like revolutionary for the time, is they had a like radio frequency gun that was built into the spaceship toy that you would buy, right? And here's what the thing was. So the bad guys had these light up chests, like they would have these flashing lights on their chest, and the gun in the spaceship toy, when you fired it at the TV screen, it would bounce that infrared beam back into the gun, and it would register that you were scoring points. And so you were actually playing a game trying to kill the bad guys on the show. So I will challenge you on that. Cool. I will say that these ideas have been around for a long time, but the technology is now catching up.
So before you say anything, if anything, I feel like that strengthens our argument because the technology has clearly been there. They tried it. It didn't reach mass appeal,
right?
So they abandoned it.
Which is what I'm saying.
Yeah, which is
with a niche idea. Which is because none of us have heard of that show.
10 years ago, television wouldn't have done Choose Your Own Adventure because they're not going to make any money on it because they're scared of it.
But in the 80s,
go ahead.
Where everyone was had enough money to buy shitloads of cocaine.
Right.
Hey man, drugs are.
That sounds like a great idea. Yeah. Print it.
Shoot my TV.
I was saying, whereas now they'll be more willing to do stuff like that because, like Andrew said, they found a way to appease the customer. They're more interested in that niche marketing in television versus 15 years ago of being, how can we make the most amount of money humanly possible
while spending the least.
Yeah,
exactly.
Well, and I think we can actually tie it into the last season of Game of Thrones. Which we're not going to go down that rabbit hole because
just film Cooper taking shit.
I mean, that's pretty much it's accurate. The best joke of that whole season is the fact they submitted it for a best writing Emmy or whatever. And
worst part,
get the fuck out of here.
The best part is oh my god, I'm blanking on her name. The Queen, Cersei. I'm just gonna scooch on by you guys.
Excuse me.
You clearly have some history here.
There's an issue to be resolved.
That million. That million.
That part. Oh my god. Anyway,
the last season was so bad.
But my point in bringing that up is that the reason why the last season was so bad is because the writing stopped telling a story and started being a television show.
Mm-hmm.
People are over all of that. Like the whole especially television now and movies and even storytelling to a point, but
we're in another golden age of television.
It's
hard to keep up with that or to compete. Sorry,
it is. But my point is that so many of the tropes of storytelling have been used that people see them right away and go, okay, I know it's gonna happen. I'm disinterested in this now. The last season of Game of Thrones suffered from just lazy storytelling and bad just narrative.
I think they kind of just forgot
a lot of things, all the things. But the reason why Game of Thrones was so popular and why season 8 was so bad is because it went away from this idea. Was because at least the first 5, if not the first 6 seasons, gave people like a more genuine experience than they had been used to in the last couple of years, which kind of brings it back to the Kickstarter thing. If you are looking for authentic, genuine experiences, shop those crowdfunding sites and find something that you personally believe in, and then it's authentic because you have bought into it. You've put your money into it. Like, it's a genuine experience for you. Whereas, like, if I go and buy another Dominion expansion from the local game shop, which obviously I'm going to love and play.
And I plan to do.
Yeah, and I will do forever because I love Dominion.
Yeah.
But
is there a new one out?
No, there's not. No, you're okay. You're okay. I was just there the other day.
What time is it?
Hold on, there's no new one. We're okay. I was just there 2 days ago getting miniatures for the 30th. There is no new Dominion that I'm aware of. But yeah, I don't know. Okay. Deep breath. But I think the difference is just big. Like you buy into something, and I think that's what people really want nowadays. Is that like that genuine experience of something that they just are authentically part of. A commitment to something. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think Kickstarter does. I'm a huge fan of, Kickstarter and any other fundraising website, especially for things like board games, because why not take like that like we were talking about earlier, take that middleman out. Like let people be.
What
creative.
about the model of like Patreon, where you not just donate or you make a payment of like $10, where you commit like 5, 10, 15, 20, up to however much a month for people to develop content and stuff like that? How do you feel about stuff like that?
I like it. Can I jump in?
Yeah.
I like the idea of Patreon, but I feel like that needs to go through Kickstarter first. Because I'm not going to be giving somebody $5 a month based on what they can put forward in a YouTube video. Like I have funded Kickstarter programs where I didn't think they were going to go anywhere. I'm like, let's just fucking see what happens here. I like this idea. I want to give them money. And then if that develops into something actually concrete and they need a continuous source of funding to keep going, I paid for WoW for 15 years when I hated the last 8 years of it. Like I'm clearly able to wanting to pay for something that I believe in the concept of.
Vanilla's coming back.
Yeah, it is.
August 20th.
27th.
27th. I'm 1 week early. I'm going to freeze myself. But I do like the idea or the whole concept of Patreon. But I feel like it should go through the Kickstarter not gauntlet, but proving grounds, I guess.
Something like that. I mean,
I think get basic funding, show at least a minimum of proof of concept.
Yeah.
And then if it's a viable product, I will definitely pay a subscription for it.
There are definitely people that abuse the Patreon platform and that model of subscribe to my content, and then I'll put out maybe a video every 2-3 months if I feel like it.
Yeah.
And I think that the value of a crowdfunding site versus something like Ko-fi or Coffee, however you pronounce it, and Patreon, like those types of Subscribe Star's another one. The value of that is that you have a specific goal in mind. It's like, okay, I want to make this video game. If you guys give me $80,000, I will make this video game. As opposed to, hey, I like drawing, and if you pay me $1 a month, I'll draw for you, on my YouTube channel.
I want to do this. Money, please.
Exactly. So there's a little bit of that to it.
I think so too.
So I've had only good experiences with Patreon, and that could just be because of the fact of what I happen to listen to, I tend to like. Yeah. But if it's always started where it's open to begin with, and as they get better and they start to have more people following them and more reasons to put content out, those are the people that are asking for money. So I have zero problem being like, here's my $5 a month, because that's nothing to me. Because I've spent more than that on significantly stupider things.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, but that $5 a month starts to add up.
Well, $60 a year.
Yeah, but
it only
more than that in one night on dumber things.
Yeah.
I get that, but I've spent $5 a month on way stupider stuff. But let's just say $5 a month, and you're shopping for a Patreon or for stuff that you believe in. You're subscribing to one thing, and then you subscribe to another and another and another because you believe in their concept. Let's say 3/5 out of those people do not go anywhere with it. You're now paying $15 a month for somebody to.
If you're not getting out of them what they if you're not getting out of them what you value at $5 a month or $10 a month or 20, you fucking cancel it. And then so that
but
I think it gives
you're
them
still giving them the money while you're evaluating whether or not you should, and that's why I think
but that's
that you should only give the subscription once it gets through the Kickstarter as a beta testing ground.
I mean, that's the way I feel when I go to the movies and I watch a movie that I don't like, and I was like, man, I just spent $20 to watch a hot pile of trash.
So what you're saying, Andrew, what you're saying, Andrew, is that to spend $10 on something that could yield nothing, absolutely nothing, is more valuable to you than paying $5 that actually incentivizes people to continue to put out stuff that people would like.
$5 a month.
Yeah, $5. So out of your $20 donation to, I don't know the game name
Where'd
of the
you
game.
get $20 from? A second ago it was 10.
So 10. That's 2 months worth of Patreon, though.
Yeah.
If after the first month you haven't gotten out of it what you want out of it, you cancel it.
Unless they keep saying it's in development. Do you know how long it takes for stuff to develop? I mean,
are you stupid or are you an intelligent human being who can say, yeah, they're going to tell me this, but are they actually producing it? What are the steps that they're taking?
How long have you played EverQuest?
EverQuest doesn't charge you money. EverQuest is free unless you play the same.
How long have you played EverQuest?
If I could cut in here, I think that there's the kind of miscommunication is that, Scott, you're talking about Patreon for creators that have like ongoing projects, like podcasts that continue. Like, I mean, Joe Rogan's going to keep going forever, right?
Yeah.
Whereas, Andrew and I are getting hung up on like individual products. Like, you're going to put out one video game or one board game,
Fair.
and so
you're asking the Patreon for DLC or something,
right? So I think that they're two different. It's two different platforms for two different purposes.
Fair.
Yeah.
I'm saying from a content, like if Chris had a podcast and he needed Patreon because he had recording costs and he had to take time out of his schedule and he had to do it, and I'm giving him $5, but out of that $5 a month I'm getting, his content is one video upload every 3 weeks of like 4 minutes, I'd just be like, not worth my $5.
That's fair.
Whereas
that's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I get that. I get the appeal of that, and I think that's what it's for. Like,
yeah.
Like a constant stream of goods, essentially.
Yeah, but I think
for your subscription.
I think we have to be careful though to not what's the way I'm trying to phrase it? I think we have to be careful to not fall into the trap of saying, like, I'm paying you, you're a creative person, give me everything right now. Like, sometimes creativity takes a while, and like if you absolutely have the right as an individual to say, you know what, this is taking longer than I thought, I'm going to back out. Good luck. But it can't turn into a platform where everybody who's putting in $5 or $10 a month starts going, I'm paying you $5 a month. Where's my fucking poster? Like, come on, let's go, Code Monkey. Let's get that shit out now. Like, I think we run into the problem where we forget that creativity sometimes it's just a fluid dynamic. Like, it's not always on. Sometimes what you create is good. Sometimes you have to go back and revisit it. I mean, we can look at George Martin trying to finish his epic story, as well as Patrick Rothfuss trying to finish his epic story. Both of them are struggling with the end of their tale. And if it was a Patreon that they were, having subscriptions to, people are already jumping down their throats and with no money invested. What if I had 10,000 people giving me $5 a month going, hey, where is the book, man? Like, you finish.
But there is a level of responsibility.
There is.
Right?
There's always a level of responsibility in a sense, but in the same thing, like, if I'm a creator, like if I'm a creative person and I make a thing, you as a consumer have no voice in the creative process. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, I think, and I almost hesitate to do this, but like, to quote Martin, like, art is not a democracy. You don't have a voice. You don't have a vote. Like, as the creator, I'm going to design it, create it, give life to it, however you want to describe it. And no matter how much money you give me, it doesn't matter because I'm the one making it. Mm-hmm. And so, like, if you are subscribed to a Patreon or subscribed to a Kickstarter and you're in it for the time period or you're in and out of it for those, a couple of months or whatever, like, you're either in or you're out. But the person who is on the other end of that money, as long as they're not, a skis bag that's scamming you, like they really don't have an obligation to you. If all their promise is that I am going to create a thing, can you subscribe to help me get there? Then they don't really owe you anything.
And I think that's fine.
Hang on, Andrew. If you don't, if I can I respond to that, because I'm going to forget, and I'm going to get a phone call. So where I will disagree with you on that, I agree with you that the public and the people don't have a say in George R. R. Martin's or Patrick Rothfuss's, Chris Tucker's, anybody's creative process or the final outcome. What I will say, though, is that if you come to the table and you say, I am working on book 7 of Song of Fire and Ice, but I can't seem to find time to buckle down and get it written. Please subscribe to my Patreon so I can do that. Mm-hmm. And then tens of thousands of people throw in $5 a month and you're making $50,000 a month. And then I see you out at like galas hanging out and I see you doing like shit on boats and like there is a level of responsibility and it's not that they have a say in the creative process, but they do have a say in like, that's our fucking product. Money. Well, what are we getting out of it?
Not the process, but the product.
But see, I would disagree again. If you think about it in just a equity point of view, you're a 1/10,000th shareholder. I don't care what you think. Take away your $5. No, and sure. That's not me saying it to you. That's just in general. Like you're 1/10,000th of my income. If you want to take your $5,
if 99 thousandths of 10 or whatever, 9,999 out of whatever, say, why is our product not fucking done yet?
Yeah.
We've been paying you for 6 months and we've seen you doing all kinds of shit other than writing.
Yeah.
We're going to take our money away. Mm-hmm. Like there is that. I mean, like going back to the social contract, stuff like that, there is that. If you're taking money from somebody on the promise of doing something, if you are upfront and say, I'm working on it, I don't have an end date on it, you don't have a say in the creative process. I can't promise you it's going to work, but I'm working on it. And you're giving updates and you're saying stuff like that. I don't think anybody has a problem with that. Where I think people have a problem with it is that if you're donating or giving or taking time to give something to somebody who is doing something creative that doesn't have a timeline and they're not seeing any return on it, like again, using George R. R. Martin, where it's been 9 years since his last book, and there's nothing. There's not even like I'm in the rough draft stages. It's just like I don't know what the fuck to do.
I'm glad you guys have brought up the subject of sort of creative accountability, because I'm going to throw a wrench in the works of sort of the Kickstarter thing, because we all kind of agree that we like this direct to consumer approach. So what I'm going to propose, and this is an idea that I've had, slide that on over.
We're moving on to topic 3. We have to take a shot for topic 2.
Intermission.
Right.
Cheers.
Hey. Cheers, fellas. Cheers, Scott.
It's intermission now.
I want Andrew to do all the drops.
So, here's the idea that I had is the issue of licensing existing IPs and franchises that are already popular. I mean, you guys have probably kept up with like how poorly received the last installment of the Star Wars trilogy was.
Yeah.
And to your point, you're right. Creativity is not a democracy. Nobody has a right to write Star Wars. But then neither do the people that wrote it now, right?
Yeah.
So, like, if we were to introduce something into... If I were to create my own crowdfunding platform, what I would do is build into it a break point where it's like, all right, say you wanted to write the next Star Wars movie. You, Joe Schmo, Andrew Tucker, you want to write the next Star Wars movie? Show me that you can get enough fans to raise $100,000, and then that'll pay for your licensing fees, and we can talk about you making that movie. And that comes down to you as a marketing person. How well can you sell your idea?
That's not reliant on selling your idea. That's reliant on just raising capital.
Yes. Okay. I'm so glad Andrew said that, not me.
So I could go out and get a loan for $1,000 and then just put in, or $10,000 or whatever.
Yeah. Well, of course, but the difference is, you could track the number of people that raised that money. I mean, I could raise that money on Kickstarter if I said, hey, I have 100 spots for $5,000. Who's in? Like,
who's in? Let's get this going.
But
well, so then what stops a shitty writer who has millions of dollars because they have ample whatever, they were born into the family of wealth, who's the shittiest writer who has no creativity, writes the next Star Wars? Like, what stops that?
Ask HBO, because I think the guys that are writing Game of Thrones are now writing Star Wars.
I mean, that's
exactly
that's
my
what we're living
No, I know,
in.
that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. It's just like there is no unfortunately there's no barrier for that.
Currently we're living in a system where there's no accountability to see he hates Game of Thrones too.
You didn't mean to bring up Star Wars.
Benioff and Weiss!
Dummies!
D&D ruined it all!
Ding ding, shame.
So and I'm not as heavily invested in some of these franchises as other people. I wasn't as heavily invested in Game of Thrones as some other people, and so I was less disappointed. I was kind of, I was like, yeah, this is about what I expected for the end. Because, I mean, nobody was thrilled with the ending of Lost either. Like, basically every epic story has a letdown of an ending.
It does.
But the way that they got to it is what was so bad. Because, up through season... I mean, I hate to jump on the
hate train.
Stereotypical bandwagon, but up through season 6, when they could actually base it off the books...
Yeah. 100%.
It was great. I mean, I got in pretty late. I really got hooked on the Red Wedding, because that was when...
As a lot of people did.
Yeah.
Most people,
I didn't watch the first season at all. So I didn't see the whole Ned Stark dying. What was the Red Wedding? Season 3?
I think
end of season 3.
End of 3, yeah.
So think of it like this. George R.R. Martin ran the Kickstarter for the Game of Thrones television show by writing the book and showing the proof of concept.
He did.
And enough people bought the book and loved it that when they pitched the show to HBO, they said, yeah. And then when they hit season 6 and the Kickstarter guy, the guy that came up with the concept, stepped out and said, these guys are going to take over, there was no meritocracy there. They didn't show that they were capable of doing anything without him hand-holding.
Well, that's kind of what I worry.
They could have written stuff. What was it? D.B. Weiss and David
Benioff. Yeah,
they just said, fuck it. Like, there were so many ideas that were coming up.
Because they wanted to go focus on the new Star Wars.
They were done.
They
didn't fucking care anymore.
No,
Sorry for cursing so much. But it was at the end, what was it? The very last battle. They were supposed to, I just read about this today. There was supposed to be a battle between 50 dire wolves, 50 wolves, a bunch of, it was a whole lot of CG stuff. And then
Bran was supposed to warg into them.
Yes, yeah. Scott, you read the same thing. Yeah. They're talking about this epic battle, and then they were just like, no, we don't care. We're done.
Well, I mean,
and they just passed it off. And then, with the writing, when Daenerys was coming back and she was riding the dragon, I hated this moment more than any other episode when she's flying the dragon. And then an entire fucking navy is hidden behind an island the size of a house.
Give me a break.
And then their excuse is she just kind of forgot about the Iron Fleet. How do you run a war and forget about an entire front?
Yeah, which isn't true at all, because they showed on the war map them saying the Iron Fleet is here.
Remember when they took Yara?
Yeah, it's like Yara's with them, so they knew about the Iron Fleet. They just completely like you said, they just stopped caring. I mean, the reality is, even without making the argument that Game of Thrones should have been 10 seasons instead of 8, which it should have been. They
argued against that too.
I know. Well, and even
they argued against 13 episodes.
Exactly.
Too.
That's what I was going to say. Is HBO said, "Hey, man, here's a bucket of money. Make 13 episodes. Tell the story. Finish this thing up." And they said, "We can do it in 6." And it was like,
you can't.
Fuck you, man.
You can, but I'd rather you didn't.
Exactly. And that's why those two bowed out of Comic-Con, because they know that what they're going to get the next time they see the fan base of Game of Thrones is just vitriolic anger. Because
what do you think they're going to do to Star Wars?
Oh, they're going to ruin it. They're going to ruin Star Wars, man.
They'll do well for 5-6 seasons, and then they'll shit on it until the next project.
Star Wars will be great for about 7 hours of content.
It depends. How many Shadows of the Empire books are there?
Yeah, they're just these two guys have made their living off of books that have already been written. And here's writing scripts for them, and then when it runs out, they're like,
It's not already written?
Yeah.
Who knows a writer?
Fuck it. 6 episodes, we'll get it done.
Do you think crowdfunding and the model of Kickstarter or Patreon or whatever would have been a better model to go for Game of Thrones at the end?
Well,
if you get people that are passionate about the franchise and passionate about the intellectual property that are going to treat it with the respect that it deserves, as opposed to people that are going to treat it as a paycheck, people like a Ryan Johnson or a Benioff and Weiss, people that were given this role and they didn't really, I mean, they might have wanted it for the prestige, but they didn't want it to do it.
Yeah.
And I think that Joe Schmo in his basement, who's been obsessing about Star Wars since 1977, he was going to make a Star Wars movie whether he got paid or not.
Yep.
So you might as well.
A bathrobe and
I mean, out in the garage fighting, spirit monsters.
And so that's where my idea of like licensing comes from. Is it's like hey, for instance, like I have an idea to create a Gundam tabletop game. I can't sell it because it's not my IP. But I don't see anyone else that's like doing it, and I'm doing it anyway as a passion project.
Yeah.
Why couldn't I crowdfund to get it professionally printed and have people enjoy it?
But trademarked and copyrighted.
Yeah,
I mean, I'd still pay the licensing fee, but it's like hey, if
you would be better off making it as a generic or a Gundam with where it's yours and you don't monetize it, then you go to a Paizo or a fucking Wizards of the Coast and say, I have this really great idea. And they go pay the licensing fee and they just give you money.
Yeah. I think
here's $500.
Yeah.
We'll buy that idea off.
I mean, I think it raises a really interesting question. Does crowdfunding supersede trademark and copyright law? Like, can I, as a crowdfunding game builder, just raise enough money and say, hey, what's the company that owns Gundam? I don't know.
It would be something
Namco?
nice.
Sure. So I would go to that company and say, hey, on Kickstarter, I started this campaign. I want to make a board game out of your show, which Gundam is awesome. That'd be awesome to play a board game of Gundam Wing. I want to produce this game, mass produce it, use all the right language, all the names, all the places, everything. Kickstarter raised $250,000.
Right. Like, you're getting 100,000 of that just for the licensing rights.
Yeah.
I'm going to use the other 150 to print the thing.
Yeah. Can we come to an agreement with this much capital on the table that I, a passion project producer, can create a thing that will hopefully be great?
I think it should. I think that's what the whole capitalistic ideal is about. I think that really should happen. I don't think it should be controlled by these super corporations who just buy out your idea and then throw buckets of money at their friend who they go golfing with.
I mean,
until they give them the IP.
I think
it's much better that way.
You heard who's writing the next Spider-Man comic book, right?
No.
Henry Abrams, J.J. Abrams' son.
Come on, man.
Really?
Yep. J.J. Abrams' son is coming out with his own Spider-Man comic book.
So it's going to be filled with a whole lot of member berries.
Well, and it's definitely
remember.
You remember Spider-Man?
All Dutch angles.
Mary Jane.
All Dutch angles.
That's all it's gonna be. Oh my god.
So and that's the corporatism. I think that's the key difference. Is the things that we're talking about are like capitalist ideas versus the system that we're living in now is corporatist, where it's like nepotism and money talks.
Closed loop of production.
It's who you know, not what you know.
I can't start a thing because the barrier to entry is a significant amount of capital that I cannot raise.
Right. I mean, you physically could not raise that amount of money.
No.
Without
Kickstarter.
Without that. And that's where Scott, I dig your idea to make an OG, my own IP mecha property. And
well, no, instead of your main, I don't know Gundam very well, but instead of Robot 123 that's IP to Namco or whatever, it's Cyborg 432. You know what I mean? Change it enough to the point where it's yours. They can't come back and be like, you took our fucking IP. That $250,000 you raised on Kickstarter, fuck you, that's ours, and now you have a cease and desist.
Yeah. So it's like Coke and Pepsi, Transformers and GoBots.
It's like Carmen Quest when who is it? Chelsea Peretti's on, and she's like, talking about her brother playing Dungeons and Dragons, and she's like, "Can I say that?" And Dan Harmon's like, "You can say it, but you can't imply that we are playing it."
It's like, okay. They had Pathfinder books anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
No, well, so that's what I'm saying. Like, you make it yours, or you change it enough to the point where it's not their IP, and then you sell it to them and say, "Look, I had this really great. I have this great game. It made $250,000 on Patreon. You can insert Gundam name 123 instead of my Robot 432."
Okay, I see what you're saying. Because I was going to say
a sickle flag back here for the next
well, so because I was going to say, like,
control the means of production
is fuck capitalism,
which is weird because I think we're all saying like.
Yay, capitalism!
Yay, capitalism! In its pure sense.
It's about time those capitalist pigs have paid for their crimes, hey, comrades? Hey?
So just say we burn it down.
New character in the campaign. Whenever if Hog dies, the like communist bard,
the communist posh British person.
Yeah. Oh, fucking right! That'd be so great, man. That'd be so great. What a good character.
But
communist posh person.
But attaching a license and attaching an IP to something, that could be the difference between raising $10,000 and raising $250,000.
Yeah.
Like, me raising money for my own game, I might make $5,000, but me making money for, Metal Gear Solid, the board game, I'll make $750,000.
Yeah.
So it's like, I see where you're going, but I think that they're...
You either attack it saying, I'm going to do Gundam, and I'm going to go talk to Namco first, and I'm going to get their approval, and then I'm going to do it, and then raise it on Kickstarter, so then that way, because they may say, go fuck yourself, and you say, can I at least use the IP, raise it on Kickstarter, I'll pay the licensing fee, blah, 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 blah. Mm. Or you say, fuck it, I'm going to make my own, and then
either way, I get to keep less. The game.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you just have to decide where the bottleneck's going to come in. Is it going to be at the beginning when you try to get the IP and you try to get the trademark, or is it going to be at the end where you develop this awesome thing and get a bunch of people behind it and then go, hey, by the way, like you were saying, Scott, this game is not about Robot Warrior 234. It's about the Gundam wing.
Like, a very in-your-face disclaimer.
Well, and
by the way, this is not Gundam.
This is not Gundam. This is the story of Robot Warrior.
It's a bit of a crowbar separation,
if you will.
Our lawyers have gone over it tooth and nail. Which is definitively not Gundam.
Nothing says Gundam more than that, because the opening theme song to the third installment of the Gundam anime had an opening theme song that was, this is not anime. It was Anime Janai, which is, and that was the whole theme song. Was like, this is an anime. But no, and regardless, I'm gonna make the game anyway.
It's its own thing, our own thing.
And we're gonna.
I say 100% make it with yourself. Do it Gundam. Do what you're doing. It's awesome.
Well, you better like it. You're gonna play it.
Yeah, I love Gundam. Yes, man. As soon as you said that, my eyebrows were like. It's like, oh, Gundam board game? I'm in.
I don't know if you guys know this, but Midnight Hatter has a YouTube channel, and he also has an Instagram channel where he does this stuff hours on end.
I do know
you can watch and subscribe to.
Yes, this is true.
I just subscribed to my first YouTube channel today.
Was it Midnight Hatter?
Subscribe to Midnight Hatter too.
It wasn't.
Oh, was it
that's
PewDiePie at least?
No. It was
hit that sub button, bro.
Smash like.
It was what's his name? It was Skeppy Sauce, Michael's channel.
Something Jamboree.
Ginger Jamboree?
No.
Who?
Gibberish Jamboree.
Gibberish Jamboree.
Is the guy you guys work with?
Yeah.
Nice.
As you sit in Stephen Bayless's.
It's a plug.
I was saying we are on Stephen Bayless's channel.
Right, yeah.
Drinking his alcohol, and then you haven't subscribed to his YouTube channel.
Yeah. Guys, don't forget the link down in the doobly-doo, as they say. A little bit of this.
Well, yeah, we're gonna finish off with a little bit of this, guys. I really appreciate you coming on tonight.
I mean, we might as well.
Oh, speaking of which, what are we gonna call the show?
Death to Capitalism.
The Hammer and Sickle Podcast, obviously.
What was the actual name that we came up with?
Social Encounters.
No,
Social
the one that we were joking about.
It
wasn't Dungeons and Dragons, but it was the other one.
It was Shit. It was so good, too.
Seize the means of initiative.
Seize the means of initiative. That's it. Seize the means of initiative. That's it. Yeah, that's it.
Social encounters, I guess, is the overall
Yeah,
show.
Right.
Seize the means of initiative.
Episode 1.
Seize the
Seize the
means of initiative.
All right, cheers, guys. Thank you for
Cheers.
for coming
Thank
on.
you.
No, man, thank you. This has been a lot of fun.
This has been so much fun.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in to a drunken rant about the goods and evils of capitalism. And I feel like we've covered a lot of good ground tonight.
Yeah, I definitely agree, man. It's been a lot of fun. Thanks for having us on. It was really fun to talk about not only just our background in gaming, but a game that we all love to play and the intricacies of the rules and just, all the fun that can be had within a game that employs the theater of the mind. It was really cool. So thanks, Stephen.
Awesome. No, thank you guys. Andrew, anything you'd like to say?
Communist joke.
That's great.
Scott, I know you got to get back to work, but what do you got for us?
Just thanks for having me. Thanks for having Chris and Andrew or Thranduil and the Almighty. It's been great talking with you guys about it, and let's get this all together and make this a thing.
Yeah, I look forward to having you guys on again. Thank you guys so much.
Sure. Thank you, Steven. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah,
Appreciate
I
it.
really want to do this again, man. Thank you.
For sure.
Hey, it's been a pleasure.
For sure, man. That was a good time.
Let's burn it down!
Boom!